Hello, everybody. This is Aaron Saft and the MR Runningpains podcast. I'm going to try to say everything I have to say up in front of this podcast episode today because I want you to go over to the YouTube channel and actually watch this one so you get the full spectrum of the information that we present here. Danny Murphy is the creator of Ultra Pacer. So ultrapacer.com, a great resource in order for you to train or plan out your race plan for your next ultra. Danny has done a tremendous job and put a lot of work into this website, and I hope that if you use it and find it a valuable resource, you'll help support him and contribute. He does this as a labor of love, so if you can contribute, that's fantastic. But in the show notes, in the title as well, I'm going to post the YouTube video. So you can check out the video and watch as we go through the platform so you can see how to use it or refer back to it. I'm sure you can still pull some stuff from the audio, but this one really is more of a visual podcast. So check it out on YouTube. Thanks to Danny for coming on and doing this episode. We'll catch up a little bit more in the MR Runningpains world in the next episode, but I really want to focus on Danny Murphy today and Ultra Pacer. So hope you enjoyed this episode with Danny. And again, check it out on the YouTube video channel. It's my Aaron Saft channel. Link again will be in the show notes. Lastly, just thanks to my new Patreon supporter, Ron Wyant. Really appreciate it, Ron. Thank you for coming on board and helping support this and making my efforts, feasible. So thank you. And thank you to all my Patreon supporters for all their continued support. I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast and getting some good information and taken away so that will help your training and your running. So I'll turn it over here. You'll hear the audio, obviously, from this podcast, but like I said, you'll get the most out of the video. So enjoy. All right, I have the pleasure of having on the podcast Danny Murphy from Ultra Pacer, an ultra runner in his own right. Danny, I'm really pleased to have you here today. Thank you for coming on board.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This will be fun.
Absolutely. I can't wait to get into this. We were talking before we got started about one of my athletes using the platform, and there's so many intricacies into this. So I really want to get into a deep dive. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So I live in Auburn, which is home of the Western States over here. I've been in the area for about 8 years, but I'm a California native. Been running somewhat seriously for about 6 years or so. I kind of fell in love with the trail system here and really started as a runner when I got up into Auburn area. It wasn't really something I had done for the rest of my life. But I get out for try to hit 40 to 60 miles a week during training sessions. And most of my running time's in the dark. We've got a local club called the Headlamps that spend our early mornings before the families wake up, wandering around the trails down there. And so that's how I normally spend my time training. And just a happy part of the running community in Auburn, and really enjoying it up here.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, Ultra Pacer is not your primary job, right?
No, that's not. I'm a tinkerer by nature, and so I kind of just start little projects here and there. And I'm my real job is a civil engineer. I do transportation consulting for a number of public agencies and private developers in the Northern California region. So this is kind of a side thing that I've been tinkering with for the past 4 years or so, 3 or 4 years, and slowly growing it into a bigger user base and having fun with it. So, yep.
Well, tell us about the origins of Ultra Pacer. How did it come about, and how did you start developing it? What did it start as, and
Yeah. So, let's see, 2019, I had signed up for Cuyamaca 100K, and it was the first time I was going to run that distance. And I live in Auburn, Northern California. Cuyamaca is a race down in the desert outside of San Diego, and up until that point, everything I had raced were my own local trails. So I was able to get out on the course and feel it out, and really understand like how I needed to hit the pacing for different sections of it. And when I signed up for the race that I was going to be traveling to, I realized that I didn't know how to strategize because I wasn't familiar with the course. I wasn't really sure how to set a plan together. And so I kind of came up with the idea that if I could figure out, I'm an engineer, right? If I could figure out how to break it down into numbers, I could translate it to something else that's usable for me. And so I started, of course, an Excel spreadsheet and trying to like, okay, well, if this is about a 500-foot climb there, what does it do to my pacing? And I've got, this amount of miles and feet between aid stations. But then as I kind of started developing that, I realized the modeling for trail runs are a lot more complicated than just elevation and distance. We've got all kinds of different terrain. We've got elevation factors. Once you get up and a little bit higher, you've got to deal with the altitude. Cuyamaca being in the desert gets really hot midday, and so there's that late afternoon sunshine with all the heat and just like all these different things kind of going into this model that I had in my head of how am I going to translate this into something I can use. And so the Excel spreadsheet kind of turned into some Java code, which slowly rolled into this web platform that we're looking at here. And really starting as something that I meant to use personally. And once I got the models all set up, kind of started sharing it, and then wanting to continue to develop it for other people to use for their planning. And so, what Ultra Pacer is it's a planning platform to strategize how to plan and pace out your races or any other trail adventure. You can put courses together for a weekend trip in the mountains or your Sunday morning long run or however you want to do it, and come up with a realistic plan and an understanding of what kind of paces you need to hit during different sections to give you an overall idea of what you're going to do, hand it off to your crew so they know what times they're going to meet you in different places. Understand, if you've got a specific time goal in mind, that you're going to have to hit a 7-minute split in a section, in order to make the whole thing come together. And so it's really that planning component. And so from on a race day perspective, you can have that all in mind. I usually print myself off a little cheat sheet, that I carry with me in every aid station. I'll look at it and say, okay, well, this next 5 miles, I've got this amount of climbing and stuff, and I've got to hit an 8:30 average for this section because that's, that'll get me to my goal, my next checkpoint. And so that's how I use it. Some people download it onto their watches and use some of the more advanced tools like with course tracking and stuff on their watches, but I found that for anything long, watches and course tracks aren't reliable enough, and paper in the end, something on paper doesn't break. So that's kind of how I usually use it on race day. But so in the end, what Ultra Pacer does is it takes all these different factors, the elevation, the grades, the terrain profiles, sun, darkness, and normalizes it all down to like a level of effort for whatever it is that you can kind of translate between races or race courses. So, if you have a 20-hour effort and with all these different factors, like what kind of a normalized pace that is, and you can translate to some other 20-hour effort to figure out how fast you could accomplish it if you put that same level of effort in. And so, when you're putting a place plan together, and I can go over this in more detail in a little bit, but you can plan out by like, I know what normalized pace I can hit, and that turns into a 26-hour finish. Or, if I want to, compare two different races, I can say, I did this one in 20 hours, I did this one in 18 hours. And, one of them is harder because of all these different factors, it'll have a higher level of effort associated with it. So, yeah, cool. That's kind of the origins of how it started. I think I posted it online for people to use in like mid 2019, something like that. And then it's just since then been kind of a work in progress as I have time to continue developing it. And I have a lot of future plans for it too, especially with the race day usage of it. So in terms of like actually tracking athletes, putting in their actual checkpoint times and forecasting, where they're going to be later on the course based on how they're doing, compared to the plan they put together, stuff like that. So, yeah.
And you don't have to divulge too much, but any plans to make a phone app so that it's, kind of accessible to the phone? And
I have thought about it. Where I really want to go with that is actually to try to leverage some of. So Garmin has a platform called Pace Pro. I don't know if you've tried it. They have a pacing capability on their higher end watches, which will factor in grade. And so it's a step, but there's a lot of other factors that get left out. But I'm hoping to figure out how I can utilize that to actually use it on your watch with that Pace Pro integration. I'm not sure if I'll be able to. If I ever find the time, I'd like actually to develop a watch app through Garmin's Connect marketplace. In terms of phone apps, no, I don't intend to really develop one myself, although I would like to figure out a couple of partners to make with an established mapping platform where I can give them the information that could be used, because there are a lot of really great mapping platforms on phones, and I'm not going to compete. So, yeah.
That's fair.
I'm hoping to figure out ways to integrate into other platforms, really, to just provide that data, on top of something else.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome, man. Very cool. Well, thank you for taking us through that.
Yeah.
So anything else before we take a dive into the platform?
No, we can go ahead and get started. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions as we go along.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's just go ahead and kind of start walking through the process, and then as we see things, I'll kind of illustrate and describe them as we're going.
Okay. All right. And can you take us from the homepage just so everybody sees?
Yeah. So the ultrapacer.com is how you get there, and it's kind of just as kind of a high level landing page. When you get to the front, there's an option to go ahead and log in. You can create an account for free. There is a membership option. It's mostly just more for like donation support. There's not a lot of things on there that are members only, although the amount of content you can create is kind of limited to a certain amount for the free accounts, because I have to pay for all the back-end services somehow. But so you can go ahead and log in, create an account. I'll just go ahead and log in with mine. And when you log in, it'll take you to what's called your dashboard. If you just create a new account, there will be nothing here. You can see I've got all kinds of stuff on mine. There's a number of different options along the top. The website itself is mobile friendly. However, to fit things on a mobile screen, a lot of stuff gets hidden. And so, I really recommend using it on a bigger screen, on a tablet or a PC, if you're really going to be using the tools. But the mobile app, the mobile version of it is great for, like, you're out on a trail and you want to know what your time should be through a certain section, you can use that as well. But certainly, like, the big screen helps a lot. So along the menu, we have your dashboard, which is all your own content. So that'll include courses that you create, plans that you create for other people's courses. And then you can also pin stuff to your dashboard. Like you've got a friend running some race and you want to keep track of where they are, so you can pin their plan so it shows up on your dashboard. There's a races tab up at the top, and this is just a database of races that I've either put in myself or that other people have created, and I've looked them over and vetted. Like any tool, UltraPacer is only as good as the data you put into it. And so, everything that's posted here, I've wanted to make sure looks like the courses are set up well, the aid stations are all in there, the terrain's all figured out. And so, if people are in here using these races, they can have a reasonable amount of confidence that they're good and accurate. If there's a race that's not here, there's a little button to request me to help build it. I get to maybe 30% of those requests just because of the amount of time I've got. But anybody can create their own race courses and races and adventures on UltraPacer just by uploading a GPX file, like through a mapping tool or through a recorded track that somebody else did. But anyway, there's quite a bit of content on this races page. Some of them, updated for this next coming year. There's a lot for past years that I just haven't checked again to make sure, okay, it's still good for this next year or not. So some of these, if people are exploring and looking for races and they see a 2022 version, and if anybody ever notices anything that needs to be updated for the next year, reach out, let me know, and I can help update those as well. So that's all in there. There's a search option, which allows you to basically just search the database for anything that any of the users have uploaded. So that includes like races or adventures if they've tagged it so that it's available for search. You can find it in here. So you just type in what you want, Western States. So here, there's a couple of Western States races, past couple of years. There's a settings page where you can kind of define some of your athlete settings and units preferences. There are some widgets for performance that I can go over a little bit later. This is one members only perk. But like if you're more or less altitude acclimated or more or less comfortable in darkness, you can actually customize how those dials actually affect your pacing. There's a section on documentation, and so this covers all the modeling and how to do various things within the application. I'll admit up front, I'm horrible at documentation, and so a lot of this becomes out of date as I continue making tweaks, because when I have free time, I prefer to spend it doing the fun stuff and not documenting. So apologies for anything you come across in there that's out of date. But my excuse is that I'm like the worst paid software engineer that exists in America. So then there's an about page that just kind of goes over generally what Ultra Pacer is. So let's go ahead and get started with you. So you're running Western States this summer.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's really exciting. And that is obviously one of the races I've gotten here. So literally like June. Western States 100. So actually the plan that just popped up is my own. But we'll go ahead and create a new one. And to move this little window. Let's see. New plan. Okay. So let's see. When you create a new plan in Ultra Pacer, you can actually create a new plan without creating your own account. Although just because of the way the software is designed, there are a lot more options that become available to you when you have an account, because I do a lot of the processing on the server side. And so without an account to associate that with, you can only use a subset of the pacing functions. But let's go ahead and create a new one. So do you have a goal? What's your goal for Western States? You wanting to just finish? You have a specific time?
I think I'm thinking somewhere between 21 and 22 hours, since I have Vermont 3 weeks after.
Go with the 21. Let's be optimistic for this.
All right.
Okay, so there are a number of different ways you can specify a target. So with the platform, we have essentially what I'm doing is trying to iterate how fast you have to go during different sections of the course to hit your target. And so the options for that are, you can pick an elapsed time. I want to finish in 21 hours, right? You could also pick an average pace. Like I plan on running on average a 9-minute mile, or you could pick what's called the normalized pace. Within Ultra Pacer, normalized here means that if it was flat ground on a smooth surface at sea level, I'm running a 6-minute mile. But with that same level of effort, what does it do to me at this? And that becomes useful if you're comparing two courses, because you can put in an actual execution for some other course, find out what your normalized level of effort is, and then stick that in some new course and say, I know I'm capable of a normalized, 50K at a 6:30 normalized pace, and I'm going to run this other 50K at a 6:30 normalized pace. How fast does that actually end up being? So that you can use that to translate between different efforts. There's an option in here to use cutoffs. So most of the courses on the races page have all the different cutoffs for aid stations built into it. And so that will tell you, like whether or not you're gonna meet those. If you have that selected, it'll actually repace if you're behind, because a lot of cutoffs are built to front load them a little bit, and then they're a little bit more, easy to hit on the back end of the course. So like if you were to just straight pace a 100 miler, if the overall cutoff is 36, you could straight pace it for a 24-hour pace. But if you straight pace for 36, you're probably going to miss some of the cutoffs in the middle. So you actually have to run a little faster in the beginning. So that enabling this use cutoffs option will make sure that none of the later cutoffs get missed.
And then, Danny, let me ask you real quick. If you're uploading a course that is not preloaded, is there a way to add the cutoffs to that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. After we get through kind of creating a plan, we can go over creating a course, which is a little longer lecture, but definitely. So yeah, anything that's in here, you can create on your own. Creating courses with aid stations and all their cutoffs and defining all that stuff. Anybody can do all of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a default number of 3 minutes in here for delays at aid stations, but you could change it. For a 100-miler, you might go a little longer. This, especially for a course like States with 20 aid stations, that time adds up a lot. So you can save a lot of time off your overall execution by reducing that number as much as possible. Strategy. There's a couple of options here that are optional. Strategy is an intended change in pace throughout a race. So the default in here, I'll go ahead and click on it. The default in here for a 100-miler is a 20% change throughout the race, meaning you start the race 20% faster than you finish it. And it's just a linear degradation as you go along. You can change this around so that you could negative split the race. If you wanted to plan your pacing that way, you could change it so, you run the first half fast and then take it easy after a certain point. So it's kind of like an intended adjustment on top of the the normalized pacing to change your pace through the race. And so generally, most people will stick with just the basic, change that's in here has the default without customizing it. But if you know that your plan makes you capable of essentially evenly pacing this thing the whole way through, where your level of effort at the beginning is the same as your level of effort at the end, which, it might make sense for 50K. For a 100-miler, I'm not convinced that straight pacing makes sense, but that's what this is. So there's an option for just a flat, which is you don't change it at all. The basic is pre-programmed in here, but you can change the percentage. So you set mine say 15%. You could also use a more advanced model where you can run flat for 15 miles and then start degrading after that. So you can do some more complex strategies if you want to. I'll go ahead and just leave it as a default for now. The heat factor, especially for Western states, is an important one to keep in mind. So, the heat model is one that I'm still trying to further develop. And right now, essentially, you can apply a maximum amount of heat, which is kind of the apex of the sun. Actually, it's about half an hour after solar noon. And then in a baseline. So for Western states, often it's pretty cool at night. So it never cools off all the way. But in the middle of the day, that sun's really going to get you. And you can make a couple of variations of this plan, that may factor in different kinds of weather. One of the improvement I am hoping to make in here before this coming summer is actually using live weather data or forecasted weather data rather, to actually do this for you. But I haven't gotten there yet. So, for now we'll go with a baseline of 5%, meaning that it's kind of even hot at night. and then a maximum of 20%. So you can follow, it's a sinusoidal curve here, but at the, just afternoon, I probably think it's probably around 2 p.m. You've got that maximum and then it starts to decline again afterwards. So we'll go ahead and start with that. You click go and then the number cruncher starts crunching numbers. And what it'll do is go through those inputs and set up your pace plan so that you are normalizing all those levels of effort. We've got our course profile, which is in green here along the left, on the Western States course profile. All the little red dots here are aid stations. The blue curve is your pacing. And so, you can see your instantaneous pace along the course at any point. You notice some huge spikes here as you're crawling out of, first the canyon from Swinging Bridge and coming out of Duncan Canyon. Where they have those backwards. Was that Swinging Bridge? That was Duncan. And then transitioning here, you can see the shading at the back. This is where you actually transition into nighttime. So at this point, from the rest of the course in, you're running in the dark. In terms of the actual modeling that's applied earlier on, we've got altitude to deal with. Coming in, we've got some sun to deal with. If you look at the details page here, there's a number of different charts, but you can kind of look through like your heat. So this is where you're dealing with heat at different parts of the course, dropping down into nighttime. And so there's a lot of data that some people will be really excited about and some people will be less excited about because not everybody loves numbers as much as I do. But ultimately, you end up with this plan. And it will provide you with, the different segments of the course where you are, gain loss between aid stations, but then also the pacing, your pace between aid stations, what time of day you're going to hit each of those aid stations, how long you're going to sit there for before proceeding. You can break it down into various segments to kind of look at a closer level, like this climb, for example, up to the thumb. You might look at specifically like, what this section coming out of the, out of Swinging Bridge. We've got really steep climb coming out of there, 21% grade on average. And it'll break down the different factors here that you're actually dealing with. So we've got this normalized pace, right? And then that's getting, we got another 167% on top of that for the grade. We've got heat, we've got the terrain factor, the altitude, you're still dealing with a little bit of altitude there. And so all those different factors building into this number that, this average pace through this section of 27-minute mile on that hike out, right? And so you can kind of drill down through various segments that way to kind of see different parts of the course, look at individual mile splits throughout. But a lot of people find, this is a really helpful table to provide to their crew so that, you've got your crew planning on meeting you at whichever aid station, they're coming into Forest Hill. So, you're going to be there at 6:00 on Saturday, right? And, they can follow you throughout the day. And as you're hitting various aid stations, if you're a little ahead or a little behind, they can kind of just apply whatever difference to, that time that they're supposed to meet you. So it's really, really helpful for the crew to have this. You can share these links to your crew so they've got it available. There's also the ability to edit like specific notes for each one. So you can have this kind of whole live plan in here. So, like you might say, I'm going to make sure I have my headlamp, of course. You could put, whatever notes you want for things like at Red Star, pick up my, Snickers bar. I love Snickers bars. And then you can define specific delays at certain aid stations. So like, you get down to Forest Hill. Where am I in the world? Forest Hill. I know I'm going to meet my crew there and I'm probably going to spend a long time. So I'm going to have a 15-minute delay there. So I'm going to pick up my pacer. So you can add, individual unique delays that are different than that just 3 minutes that we use everywhere, 5 minutes we use everywhere. So let's go ahead and crunch these numbers. And then now we've got something too that you can share this link and then everybody on your crew will have this. I'll go ahead and just show you. So like my last 100-miler was Rio 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago. So the kind of notes that I had stuck in, like there's a timing mat here. It's going to be 47 degrees. These are the kinds of things I'm going to have. This is what I want my crew to do when I get there, that stuff. So I was able to share this link, continue to work on it, continue to tweak it so that, on race day, they've got the latest version up on their phone. You can go ahead and like print what I call the race card, which is this little like 1-page box that what I do is I cut this out and I tape it on the back of my bib. And then you've got that with you all day long. So you can kind of flip to it and look at like my paces through this section. what they need to be. You can share, you can share those PDFs if you prefer to do it that way and print them. But this live plan is kind of where I always tend to go for sharing my race day plans. Where were we? Western states.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So and you can go into this details page, and it'll show you a lot more of the numbers behind how to get to the paces that were done. So we've got this is kind of about the event, what time it starts, stops, when the sun rises and sets, our total time. So like for your plan that we just put together, we had 21 hours total. Almost 2 hours of it was standing still. That's a lot of time. And so that's always really important to kind of keep that in mind, when you're planning this thing, and trying to make sure you're realistic with those dwells, because that 2 hours makes a big difference on your average paces, which way you go with it. This is always an interesting number to look at. Your average level of effort, for the whole thing, the normalized pace. You can see how big of a difference that is from 11:30 almost to 7:30, right? Like a lot of this is because of altitude early on, and because of the terrain that's in there, and because of having to slow down at night. And so there's this normalized number that's always a good one to keep in mind, that your actual pace and your level of effort are very different. The strategy we went over earlier, but this one's not incredibly exciting because it's just the normal degrading 20%. Grades, how grade influenced the pacing. So overall, it added 18% to the overall pacing. What the climbs were like at steepest in this model. We had a 425% increase because of how steep it was. How the altitude influenced you. Up at the higher elevations, it was another like 15% to your pacing, and by the time you get down below the threshold, which it doesn't matter, it's pretty much zero down below. Terrain, how that influenced the pacing, the heat, how darkness influences it. So darkness essentially is an amplification of how complicated the terrain is. So if it's a straight flat road, it doesn't do anything, but as the terrain gets more complicated, the darkness makes a bigger influence to the overall pacing.
Sure. And is there a way to adjust like the terrain, like based on a section, like in that first, obviously when you get up to the ridge, if it's a snow year, right, that's going to contribute a little bit more to.
Yeah. So the terrain, it's all built into, so the race, this one was one off the races page. So the terrain here is defined in the model. Like this first section is overall of like 9.5%. That's a little bit of the fire road climbing up to the ridge, then you turn into single track coming down off of it. When you're building your own course, you can add terrain however you like. So, this course in here for Western States is not a snow course. If it was looking like it was going to be very different, you could create a copy of this and modify it however you liked. I'll show you what that looks like in here. So when you're modifying a course, you can actually define points all throughout it and define different types of terrain, and at each point throughout how it switches up. So we've got fire road for that first ascent up till we get to the escarpment, and then we switch to single track and we follow that through until we hit Robinson Flat. We go down to fire road for a little while, then back onto single track and back to fire road. So it kind of toggles back and forth. So when you're building a course, a lot of people don't bother with the terrain if it's consistent throughout. If it's all single track, for example, and it's all roughly the same terrain, unless you're really trying to use that normalized number for something, like to compare to a different race course, it factors out. If the course has significantly different kinds of terrain, for example, like States has a lot of sections that are really nice wide fire road, more technical stuff in the mountains, the terrain becomes more important. And so when you're building this, you can choose from a number of different kinds of terrain, and there's a default number for each, but you can also plug in whatever amplification you think is necessary, for that section of the course. And so, like you can make a plan for Ultra Pacer with just a GPX file and no course knowledge, but you can make it a lot better when you have that course knowledge and knowing where the terrain comes in and into play. All the grade modeling is done right out of the GPX file, so right out of the altitude model. But terrain is everything that doesn't show up right in that altitude. It's too small. It might be roots and rocks. It might be little inundations and the trail as you're winding along the canyon ridge. So, some course knowledge helps define that terrain model and makes the pacing a lot better.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
And then one thing that a lot of people find useful too, I'll show you with when we were just looking at for Rio, there's an option to post-process after you have a race. And so this can be useful when you're building a plan. If you've got some race experience that you can leverage to help you with that, it's really useful. So for example, for Rio, I had this 20-hour goal for Rio. And I was really, really intent on hitting that. And so I set up this plan for 20 hours and I pretty much stayed right on point and wanted to kind of really get the modeling figured out to make sure I can hit it. And then after you're done with the race, you can actually, while looking at your plan, compare to, an existing activity. So for Rio, I came in at 19:55, so just under that. It was pretty
Nice.
close, and my pacer was sick of me asking over and over again, "Are we gonna make it? We're gonna make it." So this plot on the left now, I've just uploaded my actual activity on top of my pace plan, and so this blue curve here is actually the delta between the two. So you can see like through the first 10 miles, which on this course is paved pretty more or less. It jumps on and off a little bit of single track. But it was really easy to kind of just stay right on point. And then I got excited and kind of started getting ahead of my plan a little ways through the middle of the day till I was about 20 minutes ahead of schedule through most of the day. And because of that, started losing it again after I hit about 75 miles. And then kind of finished here like 5 minutes ahead of schedule. So this is really useful. And then you can see on the right here, there's some fields now in green that are highlighted that show like the actuals. So like I was supposed to hit Negro Bar at 2:46. I hit it at 2:39, right? And I spent 38 seconds there of my 3 minutes. So I made it through that aid station a lot faster. So these can be really useful numbers to really get an idea of how long do I spend at a aid station? How long am I really stopping for? And so these can be useful. Most of these I flew right through, but then a little bit later I had some longer ones. But yeah.
Awesome. And that was under actions is where you found that?
Oh yeah. So the actions menu has all these various options in here where you can modify and create new plans, modify the course you're looking at, share the course link or the plan link. There's a send feedback option in there, which will send an email to whoever created this course in Ultra Pacer. It might be me, it might be whoever else created it that shared it with you. Download stuff, compare it to previous stuff, print. And there's a couple of utilities in there for like modifying the courses, like you can reverse one or duplicate one, stuff like that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So do you have any questions about your plan and things you might want to change, or do you want me to kind of go over creating a new one and show you how that works?
Yeah, let's go through creating a new one. That might spark some questions. I think that was pretty straightforward for me, but if I get questions, I'll let you know.
Yeah. So while I've got this up, just again through the actions, you can modify the plan we created with all of the various inputs. This edit button at the top is kind of just for the page you're looking at, so it lets you like change the notes and the specific delays at different aid stations. And then as you have multiple plans, you can create as many plans as you want. Well, I should rephrase that. For the free accounts, I think can create 5, but the members can create as many as they want. And if you click on new, it'll kind of copy over what you just had in for the previous one, and you can start tweaking things for the next one. You can share the different versions. You may have an A goal and a B goal, for what you want to do, and have those ready, for race day. And then there are a couple different views. There's the pace planning view, which is what we were just looking at. If you have the permission to modify the course you're looking at, you can use the edit, and that'll take you into actually modifying the course, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, the plot on the left, there's little tooltips that show what all the different curves indicate. A lot of people ask what this gray in the background is. It's actually the grade for whatever section, just to kind of give you a visual of how steep it is. Clicking on individual, aid stations throughout the course, you can kind of drill down different segments by just clicking around and, experiment with it, click around and see what things do. Hopefully it doesn't break. If it does, let me know. Yeah. This platform is definitely a work in progress. So if anybody's feedback is super helpful for me, because, I use it a certain way. I'm probably Ultra Pacer's #1 fan. So, I use it a certain way, and when somebody else uses it a different way, sometimes it surprises me what happens. And so, if you ever have questions or feedback and something's confusing, please reach out. There's a little email button here at the top, so that'll just send me an email, and I'm usually pretty good at responding relatively promptly. Yeah, so let's go create a new course. What do you want to create a course
for? Let's see. Let's do. They changed the course for Cruel Jewel this year. Did you see that?
I didn't. That's one I think that I have maybe an older version of. Let's see. I had one for 2022. Somebody has updated for May. Let's take a look at this one. The 50, 100?
The 100. Well, both races are now starting at Camp Morganton. So it's a bit different than it was previously.
Okay.
So yeah, the start's no longer at Vogel. They won't be going in Vogel at all.
All right. So let's see. How did I get this course to start with? Copy. We'll create a new one for 2023.
Cool.
This isn't going to be the example you want, because I'm starting with an existing one. Changing it.
So do you want one that's not in there that we could?
Yeah.
We can do the 50 miler that I'm doing in April.
What is that one?
It's called the Rim Runner.
Rim Runner 50 miler. Race Raves. Oh, that's not it. Let's see. Who puts that on?
It's in Tennessee. Let's see.
2023.
Find out for you.
Here we go. Do you know, is there a GPX available for this, or will we have to put that together?
Let me find out for you. Let's see. Okay. So their website is greentunnelevents.com. And the Rim Runner.
Here we go. Okay. 50 miler?
I'm doing the 50 miler, correct.
All right. Okay. Pottery. So,
let me go back.
Generally the best place to start with for a race, is something that the course already has posted. Sometimes, it's easier to grab somebody's activity off of Strava.
Sure.
Sometimes you have to create it on your own. One thing that is important for the trail run modeling in Ultra Pacer is good altitude data. And So you want to make sure that the altitude source is good. I'm pretty sure plot a route doesn't provide their altitude, and typically I don't use it anyway. So I'm gonna go ahead and just download this, and see what's in here. I'm gonna go to my dashboard, create a new course. I'm gonna upload that GPX that I just downloaded from my Runner's website. Okay. So there is altitude data in here. Good. All right. So we'll call it Rim Runner 50. Coming from this GPX file, there are a few different options in here. So one is if it's a looped course, you can just create a course from one of the loops and then loop it as many times as you want. Or organized event gives you the option to like actually specify like a date and time and start. So let's see, that is
April 1st.
April Fool's Day. Do you know?
I don't know what time it starts offhand. I can look real quick. Let's see. 6 a.m.
Okay. 6 a.m. Does it have a cutoff?
Let's see. I think it does. 16 hour.
16. Okay. There's an option in here to override the distance or gain or loss. This is intended to be kind of like minor differences. Sometimes, well, every time you run or measure a course with a GPX or GPS, it's going to come out a little different. If you built the course with some of the online tools for modeling, whatever digital elevation model they use for the gain or for the altitude is going to be a little different. So if you know, like, this course is 100 miles, so it's exactly 50, like, for example, 49.28, we'll just assume it's 550. You can tweak those numbers, and what that'll do is in the modeling, it'll amplify it a little bit to make it match whatever you put in here. There's an option to make it publicly visible. So, if you want to be able to share the course with others after you create it or share your plans, there's a little box here at the bottom for a link that only I have so that I can post things with permanent file links. But I'm going to hit save, and then it's going to take us into that course, and we can kind of take a look at it and start building it out. So right now we've got our elevation profile, we've got the course. So the first step is to start adding waypoints that are important, which usually are aid stations for most courses.
Okay.
Do they publish aid stations for this course that you've seen?
Let me see what we got here.
Okay. Start, finish, volunteering. Looking through the website.
It looks like just distances. Looks like the in the middle of the page where the courses are, there's like 2 little charts. Do you see?
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that. So what we're looking at here is a course chart. So we've got the Rim Runner 50, 100. Looks like the 100 is just 2 loops of the 50 probably.
Correct.
And so they've posted a total.
And it's an out and back.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
I was looking at the mileage trying to
out and back once and the 100's out and back twice.
It's 2 loops. 2 loops.
Yeah, it's kind of like a U out and back. I guess it is 2 loops. Yeah. You're right.
Okay. So we've got a number of aid stations to start, Pole Bridge at 5.5. We've got a drop, one called South at 10.8, Champion 18.4 comes back through that again. So what I'm going to do is bring these up side by side. So I've got them. And I'm going to go ahead and just start adding waypoints. There's a button at the bottom to start adding those in. So where did that go? That I just had that up. It disappeared on me. No. So we've got Whole Bridge at 5.5. We've got South at 10.8. We've got Champion at 18.4. So, and sometimes you'll run into a course where they've got like a CalTOPO file and they've already got these, these points defined like in CalTOPO. Sure. So you can actually upload those directly with this
Okay.
button if you have a digital version already. But sometimes, this is what we've got to start with. Champion right. Again at 21.3. And then we're actually going to do the whole thing twice. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug those in again at Full Bridge. 60. Sorry, not 21. It'll be 30.5. We've got South again at 35.8. We've got Champion again at, there, 25, 43.4. Yeah, right. And Champion, the last one at, see how good my quick math is. All right. So that puts these points on the profile, puts them on the map.
Right.
Usually, when you see a table like this, and then you put it on a map, distances aren't exact, right? Like because the distance that's calculated by UltraPacer is driven from the file we uploaded. So between every point, it adds that all up. As I mentioned, like that is going to be a little different depending on everybody's specific watch and what day it is and where the satellites are. And so, usually these are like kind of rounded off, maybe even to the nearest half mile. So usually what you kind of have to do is take a look at those and fine tune them. This one, we'll start with South. If we, go in here, look at the satellite, is this little out and back section to what looks like a trailhead. So almost certainly like the aid stations at the end of that. So you come in here and adjust it a little bit over to where it really is, because it's not exactly at 5.5, right? It was actually 5.55. So that one was a pretty easy one. Down here at the south end, here we go, like that course, you can see it's got this little zigzag in it. So right. That's probably because somebody was standing around the aid station when they recorded it. So I'm going to assume that aid station's right where we've got it. Out here, it's going to be at this junction. So we're going to bump this one over a little bit towards where the other is. That's that first one. That's that one. And this one. So those are kind of in that same spot. So we can kind of adjust them, fine tune them to be on the map where they should be. So our actual distances are going to be slightly different than what's reported here. So that's the first step, is getting the aid stations in there. So now we've got those.
And then
if they're
good, just to be clear, when you adjusted where they went, you just clicked on the edit function on the actual aid station. Is that right?
So there's these little edit buttons, edit, delete. If you click on one of those, it'll pull up this menu where you can actually give more information, some notes on it, what kind it is. So I should have probably done a little more background before I just started going. There are a number of different types of waypoints that you can put in at UltraPacer. Aid station is the most common one. But there may be other things, water sources, just general landmarks you want to keep track of, junctions, which, like two trails meet or other. And the way I typically use those, aid station's pretty self-explanatory, water source is pretty self-explanatory, like some where you're not able to get full service. Landmark will allow you to like see on a map where something is. You can have a destination time, as part of your plan. So like, I know I'm going to hit the summit at 6 p.m. That's important to you for whatever reason in your race planning. I typically use the junction one to define like a point where the terrain changes, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But or you can have some other one. And when you use different types, they show up in different colors on the map. So like now we have this blue one, that was the water one, so they have different colors. They really more of just a labeling thing than anything. But both of these top two, aid station and water source, those are the ones where the delays apply. So like, we put in 5 minutes of delay at each aid station.
Yep.
If it's one of these two kinds, the delay applies. The other ones don't have any delay associated with them.
Got it.
And then if you have cutoff times, like you can plug those in. So like, for example, we didn't put in our 25-mile halfway through, we didn't plug that one in. But say we knew that your cutoff to the middle, you said it was a 16-hour cutoff. We'll just say it's 8 hours in the middle, even though we don't know that for sure.
Yep.
You can plug that number in there so it'll keep track of those cutoffs. So now we've got kind of all of our waypoints fleshed out. If we go to the segments, we can see all the different segment lengths, gain, losses between each what's the word I'm looking for? Interval, grades, splits. And then the next thing to start working on after we've got the aid stations in there is terrain. Just looking at the satellite on this, you haven't run this course yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, just looking at the satellite, it looks to me like the kind of course that's pretty much going to be the same throughout. Like none of these look like roads just kind of skinny around it. What it looks like is a whole bunch of single track. Oh, that one's a road. There's a little bit of road in there. Most of this looks like forested single track. Is that your impression too?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So with the terrain modeling, the way that the terrain works is you define it on waypoints, and the waypoints could be aid stations, but they could just be random points on the trail. So you might stick in a point that's like 2 miles in because we have this transition to single track. I'll put that in the wrong spot. So we have this transition to single track 2 miles in. I'm just making this up. I'm going to call that a junction, and I'm going to call this single track from here on out. But up to that point, we'll say that it was on a fire road. And so it essentially will take whatever you define at the first waypoint and carry it forward until you change it. And then it'll carry that forward until you change it again. And so you can create points along the course where you have these junctions of different types of terrain. A lot of times it's at aid stations, like for example here, at this one, we're coming through, we get to that junction. At the first champion here, we switch over to a road for a little while to about right there, where it goes back to single track. So I'm going to stick in a junction at 19.5. Where we go to single track and the visibility option I didn't talk about yet, but some things like this one aren't something you really want to show up on your plan. It's part of building the terrain model, but you don't care to see it as like a destination or like,
right.
It's important to me that I hit this at whatever time. So you can hide it. And it will just be in there in the model, but not actually be used for anything. I meant to switch that to an aid station. I'm going to call that a junction. And there we transition to single track. And it looks like I didn't quite nail the distance. So I'm going to click on it and push it forward a little bit more to there. And then at champion, we actually switched over to pavement. So we're going to be paved for a little bit. So what's now done here, if in the modeling, is this section of trail is now defined as paved, so it has no influence to the terrain. And then at this point, you hit single track again. And so you'll look, if we look at segments in here under that section between champion and champion, our overall terrain factor was actually a little less than 7 because the first part of it is 0, and then it goes to actually 12% for the single track. But if you look at individual splits past that section, like here, we've got 4, that section, we've got 7.5. So, every little branch in here uses whatever terrain you're running over that point on. And then back when we get to the next champion again, which was here, we stay on single track through until we get back to that point again, where we switch back to paved 0, and then I'll stick in that point at, should be what, 40? 40. And this is one benefit of defining it as a looped course, because if it's a looped course, you only have to define it for one loop. The track we stuck in is actually one track that covers both loops, so we kind of have to do everything twice. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so 40, we're gonna go to single track 40. I put that in the wrong place. Where did I stick it? Oh, way wrong. Way wrong. All right, we're going back forward. Okay, and I want to make that a junction. Let's see. Hidden junction. Cool. Okay. So, and I'm going to delete this first one that I made up since it doesn't really exist and change this all to single track. So, what we've defined now is this terrain model that's almost all single track, but switches to a paved section through this little length. We've added a cutoff at one point right in the middle, but we're really ready to use the model to create a new plan. And so at this point, you can just go ahead and go to the planning view, which you can get through the actions menu or through this switch from editing to pace planning, okay, and give us the option to create a new course. So we're going to go ahead and call it test run. We're going to stick in, what do you want? 8 hours? How bold are you feeling?
Sure, 8 hours.
8 hours. And then let's say, what I almost always do with my planning, I have a tendency to kind of start a little slow and then kind of pick up speed for a little bit, and then around 10 miles start slowing down again. So I'm going to do my typical my typical profile, which is kind of something like this. I'm going to go 5 there. And we'll say it's going to get really hot today. Really hot. Humid. Is it humid there this time of year?
In April, it could be. Could snow. Who knows?
So, there we have it. Here's our pace plan. You can see we've kind of got all of the blue in here. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Our instantaneous paces throughout, where we're heading each station, delays. Again, we have all the segment information we can drill down, between to kind of see how all of our pacing works out. But that's it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. So cool.
Yeah. So the main steps with creating a course are, one, getting a course with good altitude data. And so the best altitude data is usually from a watch that has a barometer in it. Most running watches don't have a barometer. So like if you download a track from Strava or from elsewhere, usually it's a digital model that's been applied to the lat longs that came from the watch. The second best source of altitude that I know of outside of an altimeter is actually Strava's altitude model. They've leveraged people's barometers to create their altitude model. So whenever I'm creating a course to use an ultra pacer that I don't have recorded from my watch already, I always use Strava's route builder, because their digital altitude model beats all the others. And in fact, a lot of times when I take something from a different source like this one, I'll take this GPX file, upload it into Strava, download it again with their altitude, and use that. When you're building a course, you can actually do it directly from Strava in here. So you can change your source in here to a Strava route and put the URL in directly. Then if you make any changes, you can just sync them up again through Strava. That works pretty well too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Earlier on, you
Yeah,
had
go
mentioned
ahead.
in your settings about there was two sliders. One was altitude and one was night running, correct?
Yes. So again, this is one perk, one of the few perks in here that is available to members only. Most of the people who decide to be members for UltraPacer are doing it as a matter of support to keep the project going. There will be in the future more members only stuff as I have time to build it out. This performance one is one of those, and it gives you a little bit of a dial on top of the default modeling. So I think what would be useful is for me to just show this thing in the documentation that does exist about all the models and how they work. That shows like this is how the grade model works. When we hit negative 20%, that's an amplification of 1.2, on top of your pacing. And the altitude model by definition doesn't kick on until you get to about 850 or 750 meters in altitude, and then you know it's pretty much a compounding exponential curve after that. And then the terrain model is defined this way and that way. And so there's these models that are built into the tool, and there are a couple of dials under the settings page where you can kind of fine tune it for you. Altitude is one where it makes a lot of sense because you can change how fit you are in terms of altitude by exposure. And so I don't do a lot of elevation running, and I always feel like my personal performance at altitude isn't as good as even it should be based on the data that's available from research. So that's why I have mine set at 120%, because I just feel like it hits me a little bit harder. And on the flip side, though, I'd say 80% of my running is in the dark with a headlamp. And so I'm really comfortable with the dark, so I've kind of dialed that one back a little bit. I intend to add more of these dials in for the other models. I just haven't gotten there yet. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm planning on doing some more work with the heat model where it would actually use real forecasts. And when I get there, that's another one that will make a lot of sense to how to dial for heat. Right now, you're defining it on your own anyway, and so the dial doesn't really make sense. But once it's leveraging other data, heat is one that you can really, really affect by acclimatizing yourself. And so
Right.
it makes sense to have some tweaks on that as well.
So just to kind of re-clarify, when we talk about altitude, the further you are towards 200%, the less um,
The more
adapted you
influence,
are.
the more
What?
influence. Yeah. So zero would mean that altitude doesn't affect you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and then 200% would mean that it affects me twice as much as it should. And when I
Right.
say it should, that's based on the altitude model, which is derived from research on racing at elevation and how they actually adjust marathon course
Cool.
requirements for altitude. And I should have better documentation on the derivation of the model, but the actual model itself is posted under the documentation.
Cool. Okay. And same thing with darkness is you're not
Yeah, so
affected
yeah,
by
you
the
could turn it
darkness.
off completely if you dial this all the way down to zero. Then
Right.
neither of those would actually do anything at all. So
Got it.
yeah, I don't, darkness. The way the darkness model works is it's an amplification of terrain, and so um, essentially the idea is that terrain has a bigger influence on you when you can't see as well.
Mhm.
And the default is a doubling of the terrain influence. So, if you're on flat pavement and there's nothing there, it doesn't do anything. But, if you're on rocky terrain, it becomes the influence of the terrain alone becomes twice as significant when it's dark out. And the way the modeling works is, when you transition into dark, like there's a dusk period, and during certain times of the year at certain latitudes, the dusk period can be a lot longer. And so, I've looked at races up in northern Sweden where like it was dusk the entire time, right? And so during that period of time, the influence of darkness matches the light level. So, it's not all at once thing. It actually slowly transitions as you go from, um, you know, sunset through twilight into darkness. Yeah.
Got
I told you I would get nerdy with this if you let me.
it. Absolutely. No, it's great hearing about where this all came from and how it's applicable to various races. So thank you.
Yep.
Is there any other pieces that we should touch on in the platform?
I don't think so. We kind of covered it all. I think, um, you know, I'm a tinkerer, and so I encourage people to just get on here and click around and see what happens. We shouldn't be able to break anything. Anybody can create content in here. If it lets you, you know, modify something, it's because you're supposed to be able to. So, some people I think are a little concerned with seeing something here and not knowing, oh, can I click this button and modify it? If you've got the permissions to, it's because you're supposed to. So, you can go ahead and play your own plans, share them, just explore and reach out to me if you have questions, because I love to talk about this stuff. And I'm really not making any money with it. It's really because I love it. So I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't want to talk about it. So yeah.
Well, I hope people do contribute, especially if they're using it. I myself contribute because I think this is such a great resource, and that's kind of why I want to do the podcast, so other people can learn about it and kind of see how to use it. So, Danny, thank you so much for creating this amazing, predictor for all of us. It's a work of love, and I can see that. So, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a fun project, and just in terms of my next steps, I mentioned further developing the heat component. I showed kind of briefly the different views. We have the editing view for the courses and the planning view, and then there's also the post race view for evaluating past performance. My next big push is going to be a real-time one, which allows crew a little bit more control over what they're doing. Most people find this tool especially useful for their crews, because their crews are always wondering where they're going to be and what time. They don't want to be late. And so when that comes online, that's going to give crew the ability to say, they hit this aid station instead of, at 2:10 when they were supposed to, they got there at 1:30. And so they can plug that in, and utilizing the modeling, it will forecast all their times downstream from how well they're actually doing.
Cool.
And, I'm really excited about that, because, it'll be really useful for the crews. And then ultimately, I would love to tie it in with some of the actual real-time race platforms. A lot of races now have timing mats with broadcasted information. And so I haven't started those discussions yet, but I would love to hook this in with some of those companies doing that work, where that data, I can pipe it over to this with an API and we can just sync it all up, which would be awesome. But I haven't gotten there yet.
So cool.
Yeah.
Oh, man, you got some plans, and that's wonderful. Great.
I have plenty of plans. Time is a whole different challenge. I have, on top of my actual career, I have a family. I've got 2 kids, 6 and 8, that keep me pretty busy. And so, yeah, my period of time between like 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. before everybody's up and busy, it's my time for tinkering and for running, and it's where I get all that done.
Awesome, Danny. I know there was the link above the email. Do you mind if I just put your email in the show notes, that if folks want to reach out?
Not at all. Yeah, Danny@ultrapacer.com. Yep. Awesome. I also have a Facebook group, which I occasionally post stuff in, although I'm really bad at social media. So the best way to reach out to me is through email.
Cool. I'll put that all in the show notes, as well as the website. So, Danny, thank you again for your time and for going through this. Thank you for this resource. It's fantastic. So, keep up the good work, my friend.
Thank you, Aaron. Talk to you soon.